Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Andy Shevchenko. On behalf of Media Center Ukraine team, I welcome all the journalists sharing our flight for freedom with the world. With us, we have Oleksandr Striuk, the mayor of Severodonetsk, the city that has riveted our attention for the last 2 months. Alexandra, good day. What are the recent developments in your city? There's no good news I could share with you. The town is occupied by the Russian troops. The Russians are trying to establish their occupational government, appointing different commandants, trying to put together some government officials. According to our sources, they have difficulty doing this. The situation with the humanitarian supplies is dire. Their living standards are grave. So the situation is very difficult as the infrastructural networks have been badly damaged and the essential services cannot be brought back anytime soon, despite the promises made by the Russians. This is just wishful thinking on their part. Shall we discuss the military aspect? The battle for Severodonetsk was one of the most fiercest battles fought in the 4 months of active hostilities. Now, the stage of this battle has been completed. Are you in a position to tell us how the town managed to resist this massive onslaught of the Russian troops? The resistance was enabled by the very heroism of the Ukrainian fighters, the National Guards, the Ukrainian Armed Forces fighters, their top professionalism and heroic dedication were what enabled the 4 months of this fierce resistance we've been putting up for 4 months. We know that withdrawal of the troops was very difficult in the last few days, or rather the last week. Can you share any insights into the withdrawal of the troops? We had to cross a river as there were no bridges standing at the time. We had to use some means to cross the river, used whatever materials we had at hand in the city, so this was a massive undertaking. However, all the units have been able to withdraw their personnel and bring the assets with them. We have a question from the audience. Good day, I'm Natalia Staroprava from the Media Center Ukraine. The occupiers are saying they've captured Ukrainian servicemen from Azov in Severodonetsk. Is there anything you could say to this? This is war. This is about street fights. There was a line of conflict, and the street fighting was relentless, and those developments are inevitable. As for the Ukrainian servicemen taken captive, that's not for me to say. It's for the military commander to issue comment about the personnel which may have ended in this predicament. Please let me know if there are any more questions in the audience, but let me ask you about the civilians. Meanwhile, for a while you've been able to actively evacuate the people, and then that wasn't possible any longer. So what about the situation now? Can the civilians still leave the city? They can only leave the city towards Russia-controlled, Russia-occupied territory, as there's a line to Lysychansk, and there are active hostilities on that vector, and any movements of civilians is perilous. Earlier, You've told us that the occupiers are trying to enforce their government in the city. And according to the International Convention, the responsibility of the humanitarian needs of the population is at the hands of the effective government. So are the Russians coping, organizing healthcare, food delivery, etc.? The healthcare exists in its very basic level. There are few medics staying on behind in the hospitals. Over the last months, we created minimum stocks of medications that people would need. So the hospitals can still deliver aid to the wounded civilians or civilians needing medical aid. As for the humanitarian situation in broader terms, including the drinking water, the food supplies, they are critical. According to my information, the humanitarian supplies are not regularly delivered to the city. There has been a propaganda delivery, and this was just intended to shoot TV footage. The Ministry of Defense is saying that message posted in the network disrupted a military operation in Severodonetsk. Is there anything you can say to this effect? I wasn't the one to plan the operation. It's a purely military question, and I'm not in a position to issue a comment. Are there more questions? Media Center Ukraine from Aliana. Could you please give us an estimate of the civilians staying on in Severodonetsk? And have you heard about the forced deportation of people into Russia? There were 7 to 8,000 people staying on in the city. Some tried to return to the city, some tried to leave. As far as I know, the occupiers are lodging in the free apartments and homes. They're stationing their troops and officers in the houses idle and making their use of the city. Those who can still leave try to leave to stay with their family, friends in the occupied territories. And it is for them to decide how to organize their life. Why was Severodonetsk such a critical city to capture for the Russians? So why were the Russians so keen to capture Severodonetsk? Severodonetsk, since 2014, was the regional capital, the regional center of Luhansk in the Free Ukraine territory. So there was certain symbolic importance attached to Severodonetsk. It was important for the Russians not only to capture territory in Severodonetsk, but also to capture Severodonetsk, which is the administrative regional center. Now we see the Russians actively attempting to encircle or capture Lysychansk before heading west. Knowing the terrain, knowing the locality, the information from the open sources, what can you say about this? Lysychansk is a well fortified city. To look at it in military terms, but considering the combat power committed to taking it, the artillery is relentless. Basically, the city is razed to the ground. The heavy artillery, the aviation strikes are brutal. And once Severodonetsk has been captured, the whole might has been dedicated to the capture of Lysychansk. In the 4 months of hostilities, For the last 2 months, we heard that Severodonetsk was living hell. It was enduring all the assault of the Russian military might uh, addressed at Ukraine. When you are asked to recall it after the fact, what will come to your mind? It will come to mind when you made it to the cover, driving around the city. Are you in touch with the people staying behind in the city? The connection is intermittent. I'm mostly in touch with people who've left the city and find ability to connect to the internet and then reconnect with their families in the Ukraine territory, Ukraine government controlled territory, and sharing the real developments in the city. If you had a chance to address your city residents in Severodonetsk and those in Ukraine or elsewhere, what would you tell them? I would tell them, hang on there, residents of Severodonetsk. Severodonetsk is Ukraine and shall always be Ukraine. We shall rebuild it. This is the mayor of Severodonetsk, Oleksandr Striuk. Thank you for talking to us. Our next briefing is coming up at 11:30. We'll talk to Vsevolod, the head of mission of Ukraine.